And welcome back to the 22 News debate among the Democratic candidates seeking their party nomination for a Hampden County District Attorney. Under the format we are using this afternoon, I am asking a question that each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. The order of questions was determined by drawing that took place earlier. We will begin this second round of questioning with Anthony Gulluni. And the question is, there are several unsolved murders in Hampden County. What resources would you devote to bringing these cold cases to justice?
We have a tremendous cold case unit now in the office, and as the only current prosecutor in this race, I've worked side by side with many of those folks. We have a tremendous caseload in Hampden County. In the Superior Court, we handle the most cases in all of the Commonwealth most years. So we've got a great specifically derived team to work on these cold cases who have experience in working with these kinds of cases. I think that unit has to be supported. As a matter of fact, there was a 21-year-old murder just solved. And as a matter of fact, it went to trial just in the last couple months, and it led to a conviction. So it's going to be critically important that we continue the focus on these cold cases and not forget about the victims. As the district attorney, our utmost responsibilities to the victims of crime, specifically and especially violent crime, and the families of those who have been murdered or seriously injured. So the cold case unit would be a focus of mine, and supporting it with resources as much as possible would be a goal.
Shaun Allen, you were next.
I've made this a #1 priority in my platform. I'm from Agawam, and I personally know Dee Ziegert, who's waited 2 decades for justice on a case where they have the perpetrator's DNA, and that's just unacceptable. The cold case unit is very good, and there's very good people that work there. I actually personally have tried cases with 2 of the lawyers that are working on cold cases. They retired and came back, and that's really the kind of skill that you need. But there's many cold cases. I believe there's 16 right now, maybe a little bit less, listed on the DA's website. But for 3 lawyers, that just simply isn't enough. We need fresh eyes on the new cases. And that's not saying anything about the lawyers that are working there, but sometimes fresh eyes bring new perspectives. But we also need the resources. We need money. And that's part of the district attorney's job, is to get to Beacon Hill and to lobby, to have a lobbying component. And come January, there's going to be a lobbying component, and cold cases are going to be prioritized. And I'm going to reach across the country, as well as in this county, to look for experts to come in and say, please, look at this cold case. Give me your perspective.
Hal Etkin, you are next.
An unsolved homicide is probably the worst thing that can exist in the community. We need to solve these crimes, and we need to solve them almost immediately. In order to do that, sometimes the best thing is to bring other people in, someone who's an expert in that area, who's not from the area, who can look at that case file from a new perspective and just see if there's something there that may have been missed. And that's what the drug forfeiture money is, to come up with innovative ways to solve crime. The second thing that the district attorney's office needs to do is to look for any latest techniques in terms of scientific aids or tools that can help to maybe solve these cases. We just have way too many existing at the moment, and knowing that there's a murderer out there who has yet to be brought to justice, I find almost shocking.
Brett Vottero, you will complete this round of question.
Well, I've worked cold cases. I've worked decades-old rape cases and homicide cases. And I can tell you there are a lot more than 16 unsolved homicides in Hampden County. You know, the challenge with those cases is that they require an intense amount of time, prosecutor's time, and grand jury time, because these are cases that, when they happened, many of them were street violence cases involving street gangs. And when the crimes took place, people refused to speak to the police. They refused to cooperate. And I've worked on cases like that. It requires, instead of a homicide case that may take a day to put into the grand jury, those kinds of cases can take weeks as you bring in witness after witness to ask them questions. So it has to be a priority, but it was going to require grand jury time, prosecutor's time, and staff time. We can do that, but we need to stop letting the cases get cold to begin with. And that's an important aspect of what I'll bring to the job.
Our next question will first be directed to Shaun Allen. A district attorney is an administrator of the office and all of the assistant district attorneys there. Arguably, the DA would be the most capable prosecutor in the office. How involved would you be in personally prosecuting in the courtroom? How would you choose which cases that you would be lead prosecutor? Mr. Allen.
Well, I'm going to use my 15 years as a trial lawyer. I've appeared in over 250 cases in Hampden County Superior Court alone, and I've tried, the last homicide case I tried was a very bad case in 2009 of a boy that drowned on a boat. But I think the district attorney has to be in the courtroom on the most important cases, but the district attorney has to have involvement in every homicide case, has to have say in every homicide case, has to work as a team with competent competent staff. Because clearly the district attorney is an administrator and certainly cannot be in the courtroom trying every case. Otherwise, you're not going to get the job done that needs to be done with respect to running the office, getting the money, organizing how that $8.4 million budget is currently going to be spent. But I think the #1 goal would be to reach out and hire very competent staff that can manage the cases. But I will be in the courtroom and have an active role in the courtroom with my staff.
Hal Etkin, you are next.
With very rare exception of some major case occurring in Hampden County, the district attorney will hire the appropriate personnel to prosecute these cases. If you go up to Northampton and you look at Dave Sullivan, a district attorney, very seldom, if ever, goes into a courtroom to prosecute a case. And that's what really the future of the office needs. You need to have an administrator. You need to have someone who really understands that really the best prosecution is preventing the crime from occurring in the first place. And the DA's best function is to be out there making sure that the office operates in a way where we're preventing crime, not using the past methods that haven't been successful in just prosecuting them.
Brett Vottero, you're next.
Well, I've worked in the Northwestern District Attorney's Office as a special prosecutor. I was brought in to try the Anthony Bay arson homicide case, a very difficult case. And you cannot compare the crime problem in Northampton to the crime problem in Hampden County. We have multiple unsolved homicides and a large number of homicides every year, and a lot of other serious crime. The district attorney needs to lead the team. They have to know how to get it done in the courtroom in order to guide the young prosecutors. While I'll be in the courtroom, I think I view my role as much more one of leadership and mentoring. I'll go into the courtroom, but I'll go in the district court and in the juvenile court as well as the superior court, because I think the DA needs to set the role for that office. It needs to develop a staff of prepared, ethical, sound prosecutors who can handle any case. But it's the district attorney that should be guiding their strategy in the courtroom.
Anthony Gulluni, you will complete this question.
Thank you. We have a very proud tradition in Hampden County of having district attorneys that try cases, going back to Matthew Ryan, to Bill Bennett, to Mark Mastriani. Bill Bennett endorsed my candidacy as the person best suited for the job, and that makes me very proud. I intend to try cases, but the most critical function of the district attorney going forward for the future of this county is someone who can create the partnerships and the relationships in the county to make sure we have a profound effect on people's lives, on victims' lives, on the county's future. So I intend to try cases. I've tried a life felony case just 5 or 6 months ago before I left the office to run for district attorney. I'm prepared and I feel ready to try cases, but also, and more importantly, lead an office that makes an impact on the county and its future.
Our next question will first be directed toward Hal Etkin. As district attorney, would you set up a system that would streamline the process for citizens who want to register complaints against police?
It's very important that citizens who have problems with the police feel that their complaints are going to be handled fairly and are going to be handled in a manner that actually achieves a result. It's very, very important for the public to have confidence in their police, and that's an important function of the district attorney to make sure that that occurs. I would, on the first day, review the existing protocols that we have and to see what improvements can be made. We have to do a better job. The fact that there's community groups who are distrustful of the police, that shouldn't exist, and it needs to be improved upon immediately.
Brett Vottero, you're next.
Well, you know, I read recently the year summary of the civilian complaints in the Springfield Police Department, and I think the police department has done an effective job reviewing and handling those complaints. And for the most part, the police do an excellent job. There is a role for the district attorney's office, and it's a role that I've seen for the last 30 years. Anybody who feels that they have a complaint against the police, against their neighbor, against anyone, comes down to the district attorney's office and asks to speak to somebody there, to bring a private complaint. And we've always had an effective process for reviewing that. But we review it the same way we do with police arrests. We look to see what the facts are. We look to see what the evidence is. We look to see if there are additional witnesses to be interviewed. That's part of the core function of the district attorney's office, to investigate and prosecute whenever it's appropriate.
Mr. Gulluni, you're next.
While the district attorney's office must have a strong and effective relationship with all police departments across the county, the district attorney has a responsibility above and beyond that relationship to make sure we investigate allegations of police misconduct. When police commit crimes, we are the prosecuting body in most instances. So the district attorney has to operate independently at times. And I've been in the office during prosecution of police, during investigations of police misconduct. So I think it's critically important that we have an advisory board, a community advisory board that would be established of community leaders and people that can communicate directly with the district attorney and my staff, hopefully, to voice their concerns about what is happening. If there are issues, specific issues regarding police conduct, the district attorney will be aware of them and really at the forefront of investigating those kinds of things in an impartial, independent way.
Shaun Allen, you will complete this round of this question.
Having had years of experience, most recently in representing people that feel they've been victims of police brutality, I'll first say that 99% of our police officers are excellent, hardworking men and women that put their lives on the line every day. But as in every profession, there's going to be that 1% that crosses the line. And it's the job of the district attorney to make sure there's accountability. And right now, the system we have is a civilian review board, which isn't always effective because a citizen will come in, they'll file a complaint, and the civilian review board will make recommendations, and then it's at the discretion of the commissioner as to whether those recommendations will be implemented or not. So I think we need to look at the complaint procedure. We need to make a procedure that is a little more open, a little bit more transparent, and a little bit more empowering. And if we do that, I can tell you 90% of what we're seeing now will completely improve. And the district attorney needs to partner with the community organizations that have interest in seeing that this type of system be changed. And I certainly will do that in January.
Our next question will first be directed toward Brett Vottero. We all remember, and some of us miss, former Holyoke Police Chief Anthony Scott. He frequently expressed his unhappiness and dissatisfaction with decisions on certain cases and defendants made by some judges here in Hampden County. Prosecutors can take a hard line on everything from street crime to white-collar crime to the amount of a suspect's bail, but in the end, doesn't the judge ultimately have the last word? Mr. Vottero.
Well, you know, judges have the last word, but this is the point that I mentioned earlier. Right now, the way that our system is organized, a defendant who gets a criminal sentence that they think is too long or too tough, or bail that they think is too high, has the right to appeal. But prosecutors do not have the same right. Now, I think that prosecutors, there are times where we do everything we can, and I've agreed at times with Chief Scott when a decision's been made to release somebody without bail, or to not hold them on a dangerousness hearing, or to not sentence them to the amount of time that's appropriate. I've certainly had cases where I was profoundly disappointed in the sentence given by the judge. I can think of one woman who received a very light sentence for her role in the death of a 3-year-old boy. That's the judge's right. But the law needs to be changed to give prosecutors the right to appeal sentences that are too low. And as I said, I'd like to see a change in the mandatory minimums, but I'd like to retain and gain that right for prosecutors to appeal those sentences. I think Chief Scott would approve of just such a plan.
Anthony Gulluni, you are next, sir.
We have to use the laws we have now. And as a current prosecutor, I've often been frustrated by certain decisions. In saying that, we have, I think, a group of dedicated, fair, and public service-minded judges in all our courts across the Commonwealth and in this county. However, I think that the district attorney's office has to keep in mind public safety and its obligations to make sure we're protecting people and meeting our mission of serving people and keeping them safe. That's why I've advocated for certain mandatory minimums for violent and repeat offenders. We have to have and use the power given to us by the legislature when possible. We are, and the district attorney is charged with protecting the people of Hampden County. And we have to use the tools given to us by the legislature, including some laws that involve mandatory minimums.
Mr. Allen, you are next, sir.
You know, the overall goal is to seek justice for victims and make sure fairness is done for all the parties in a given case. Chief Scott, Take Back Our Streets, he was very aggressive. I thought it sent a good message to the community, and particularly the criminals that were out there, because you didn't know when the chief was going to take back our street, or that was his saying, take back our streets. But I think his approach with the judges was a little not completely respectful, attacking them in the public, because we have an appellate system. People don't agree with judges very often. I don't agree with judges all the time when they make decisions, but that's why we have an appellate system. And it's not just the inability to appeal a sentencing, as has been referenced, but there's many things judges do that a prosecutor can file an appeal for to make sure the judge is held accountable. But there's a manner to do it, and you have to do it in a respectful manner.
Hal Etkin, you will complete this round on this question.
Thank you, Barry. Like Chief Scott, I would like to send violent and repeat offenders to jail as soon as possible. However, we're in a democracy. We have the rule of law. And it's up to the district attorney to explain to the public why certain things occur at the courthouse that may not seem to be fair or appropriate. If the district attorney's office is doing what they're supposed to, and if they're working hard, and they're doing their job and they're getting prepared, justice will be found in the courtroom.
Our next question will be directed first to Mr. Gulluni. Are there sufficient laws and evidence-gathering measures in place to win convictions for impaired driving for marijuana and prescription drugs?
I think there are. I've personally prosecuted many of those cases in my time as a prosecutor. Very often they present some legal challenges, but I think it really boils down to the dedication and professionalism and skill of our police officers, particularly our state police, who work very often on our highways and stop these kinds of offenders. It's very dangerous. We saw just out of our county, I think it was in East Hampton, a death as a result of someone at least allegedly operating under the influence of heroin. So we have to continue to be proactive. We have to continue to give the resources to our state police and local police departments. You know, the state police have endorsed my candidacy because I've done the work in the courtroom prosecuting those cases that they've made involving driving under the influence of drugs and narcotics. So I think it has to be a continued focus of the district attorney's office to keep our folks safe on the streets.
Shaun Allen, the same question to you, sir.
I think the police are doing a great job with prosecuting those types of cases. Sometimes when we deal with narcotics, it's much harder to identify the symptoms. But I think we need to get more money and have more officers specially trained, because that's very important to have them certified in specializing on how to identify the symptoms of narcotic use, of being under the influence of a narcotic rather than alcohol sometimes, which is a little bit easier because you can smell what is known to be an alcoholic beverage. But they're on track. There's 4 or 5 specialized state troopers that are on 91 every night. They're doing a great job. They're making arrests, but I'd like to work at getting them more money, more training, and get more officers trained in identifying the problem.
Hal Etkin, you are next, sir.
I have also been endorsed by the police and retired police chiefs because they know I understand the problem. At the present time, we do not have enough police officers who are properly trained to handle these impaired drivers. And it's an awful thing because we're having more and more impaired drivers who are under the influence of these types of medication and drugs. We need to use the drug forfeiture money to assist departments in order to get at least one member of each department properly trained to be available to be make the proper arrest and bring that suspect back to the station and gather the necessary evidence so the district attorney's office can properly prosecute that defendant.
Brett Vottero, you're next.
I do think that we need to look at the law to see if we can make some changes to make it easier and more effective for prosecutors to establish what the substance was that somebody was under the influence of. But for 30 years, the standards have been fairly clear, and it is whether or not the consumption of whether it's alcohol or drugs have impaired or lessened somebody's ability to operate a motor vehicle safely. So I think particularly, as you mentioned, with the legalization of marijuana and the decriminalization here in Massachusetts, we need to look to see if the law is giving us the right tools, but it'll still require trained and effective prosecutors to be able to establish that in court, and trained police officers who know how to ask the right questions and gather the correct evidence for us to be successful in court.
All right, I want to commend the candidates for keeping to times, and we've actually got a little bit of extra time because some of you have gone short. You've been very economical in your use of words, and I'm going to ask you to be just a little bit more economical because I'm going to ask one more question, but have you answer in 30 seconds instead of 1 minute. The last question will be directed first to Shaun Allen, and it is, there are calls for more treatment and less jail time for those dealing with addiction issues. Alcohol and drug addiction, admittedly, can be a lifelong struggle. To what extent and for how long should taxpayers pay for substance abuse treatment rather than prison? And,
Well,
okay, Mr. Allen.
It's about having a smart strategy. It's about how much money do the taxpayers want to pay? Do we want to keep putting people in jail for sentence after sentence after sentence, or do we want to initially, when they come in, refer them to treatment? Earlier on, I said 42,000 to incarcerate, 8 to 10,000 to treat. It's time to change our focus and treat rather than incarcerate, and do it on the front end rather than 10 years later when it costs much more money.
Mr. Etkin, you have 30 seconds for the same question.
Obviously, if we can look to private insurance to pay for the treatment, that's something that should be done first. But we're a compassionate society, and treatment is always going to be preferred over incarceration. It leads to a better result, and in most cases, it's actually cheaper.
Mr. Vottero, you're next.
We need to make these decisions based on evidence. We need to look at what programs are effective. And it's certainly true that it's cost far more to incarcerate somebody for a long period of time than to provide treatment up front. Really, it involves spending the same amount of money of taxpayers' dollars that we're using now, but trying to spend it at the front end to keep the crimes from being committed. That's the real issue with substance abuse, reducing the crime rate.
And Mr. Gulluni, you will complete this round of questioning.
I think it's fiscally prudent to spend money to try to treat people in their early stages of addiction. There's no question that drug abuse and addiction is driving our crime problem, especially in our urban areas in places like Springfield and Holyoke. It's incumbent on the DA's office and the district attorney to set policy to hopefully reverse that trend and identify those folks coming into the courthouse who have that problem and are struggling with addiction, because it's humanitarian and it's fiscally prudent and it's going to achieve our end of public safety.
And that does complete our second and final round of questions in this candidates debate. We will hear closing statements from the candidates right after these messages.